My son's wife said, "You weren't invited to this party." I cancelled their mortgage payment and took back my gifted car the next day. The opulent hall of the Grandview estate shimmered under a canopy of fairy lights, the air thick with the murmur of 100 conversations, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the sweet scent of exotic flowers that struggled to mask the subtle aroma of old money. It was Orion and Kaylin's 25th wedding anniversary, a lavish affair meticulously planned and executed, designed to impress every socialite, business associate, and distant relative they had ever encountered. Every detail screamed extravagance, from the imported caviar canapés, artfully arranged on silver platters, to the live string quartet playing classical pieces that blended seamlessly with the sophisticated chatter. Crystal chandeliers dripped diamonds of light onto the polished marble floors, reflecting the expensive gowns and tailored suits of the guests. Yet, amidst this dazzling display of wealth and manufactured joy, one person felt a chill that cut deeper than any winter wind, a coldness that seeped into her very bones. Alara, a formidable widow of 78, stood just inside the massive wrought iron gates, their intricate design offering no comfort. Her heart was a fragile thing, fluttering with a desperate hope, a tiny bird trapped in a gilded cage. She wasn't dressed for a party, her simple, elegant wool coat and sensible shoes spoke of practicality, not pageantry. She had simply arrived, unannounced, expecting a quiet family dinner, perhaps a small, intimate celebration. Her son, Orion, had mentioned an anniversary celebration, vaguely, weeks ago, during one of his brief, financially motivated calls, but had never provided a date or an invitation. Still, Alara, ever the optimist when it came to her family, believed he meant for her to be there. She had always been there, a constant, unwavering presence, a silent supporter. A mother. Her eyes, once sparkling with life, now held a hint of wistfulness as they scanned the vibrant crowd. She searched for Orion, for Kaylin, for her beloved grandchildren, Leo and Sophia, their faces a balm to her often aching heart. The noise of the party was a cacophony, yet her ears strained to pick out a familiar voice, a welcoming call. She saw Kaylin first, a beacon of superficial glamour, resplendent in a gown that must have cost a small fortune, its shimmering fabric catching the light. Kaylin's face was alight with a smile, a dazzling, public display reserved only for those she deemed worthy of her attention, for those who could elevate her status or enhance her image. A hopeful smile, tentative and vulnerable, graced Alara's own lips as she took a tentative step forward, her gaze fixed on her daughter-in-law. Kaylin's eyes, sharp and calculating even from a distance, fell upon Alara. The brilliant smile faltered, like a dying star, replaced by a look of thinly veiled annoyance, then outright disdain. A sudden, sharp pain lanced through Alara's chest. Kaylin detached herself from a group of laughing women, their heads swiveling to follow her, and approached, her movements graceful yet stiff, like a predator circling its prey. Mother Alara, Kaylin's voice, when it came, was saccharine, each syllable laced with an undeniable edge of frost, a chilling mimicry of warmth. What a surprise. We weren't expecting you. The emphasis on this "and you" was subtle, yet cutting. Alara's hopeful smile wavered, shrinking under Kaylin's cold gaze. Oh, dear. Orion mentioned the anniversary. I thought perhaps I'd misheard the date for the family dinner. I brought a small gift. She gestured to the exquisitely wrapped package she held, a beautiful crystal decanter she had chosen with such care, imagining it gracing their dining table. Kaylin's eyes flickered to the gift, then back to Alara's face, a condescending smirk twisting her perfectly manicured lips. Family dinner? Oh, Mother Alara, this isn't a family dinner. This is our anniversary celebration. A rather exclusive one, as you can see. She paused, allowing her gaze to sweep over the grand hall, over the hundreds of invited guests, emphasizing the point, making Alara feel smaller, more insignificant with each passing second. And frankly, her voice dropped, though it was still audible enough for a few nearby guests to turn their heads, their whispers beginning to ripple through the crowd. You weren't invited to this party. The words, though delivered with a deceptive softness, struck Alara like a physical blow, a sudden, brutal impact to her core. Her hopeful smile crumbled, replaced by a mask of quiet shock, a vacant stare. She felt the eyes of strangers on her, their whispers a distant, mocking hum that amplified her humiliation. Public humiliation. The air seemed to thicken, making it hard to breathe, each inhale a struggle against an invisible weight. For decades, she had poured her fortune, her love, her very being into Orion and Kaelin's lives, all for the warmth and connection she craved, for the illusion of a family that cherished her. And in return, she was being publicly dismissed, treated as an unwanted relic, an embarrassing stain on their meticulously crafted image. A profound silence descended upon Alara, not of shock, but of absolute clarity. A dam, built brick by painful brick over decades of silent sacrifices and unacknowledged love, had finally shattered. The pieces of her self-delusion, once so carefully maintained, now lay scattered at her feet. She looked at Kaelin, truly looked at her, and saw not the daughter-in-law she had tried so desperately to love, not the woman she had tried to nurture, but a calculating stranger, devoid of empathy, utterly self-absorbed. She looked past Kaelin to the glittering party, to the son who was nowhere in sight, who had seemingly abandoned her, and the grandchildren who never called, their youthful faces suddenly distant, unfamiliar. The illusion of family love, meticulously constructed in her mind, crumbled to dust around her, leaving only the bitter taste of reality. "I see," Alara said, her voice barely a whisper, yet resonating with an icy calm that surprised even herself, a new, steely resolve forming within her. She looked down at the gift in her hands, the beautiful crystal decanter, gleaming under the fairy lights, a poignant symbol of her wasted affection. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered it to the ground, placing it gently, almost reverently, at Kaelin's perfectly shod feet. "In that case," she continued, her gaze rising to meet Kaelin's, her eyes now devoid of all warmth, all hope, all vulnerability, replaced by a cold, unwavering certainty, "I believe I have overstayed my welcome." Without another word, without a backward glance at the glittering, hollow party, at the grand estate that had consumed so much of her life and fortune, Alara turned and walked out of the Grandview estate, leaving the decanter, the party, and decades of silent suffering behind her. Kaelin watched her go, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps surprise, perhaps a fleeting moment of unease, in her eyes, before she dismissed the incident with a dismissive shrug and returned to her adoring guests, oblivious to the earthquake she had just unleashed. Alara, however, walked with a newfound lightness in her step, the crushing weight of a lifetime of unrequited love suddenly lifted, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve, a quiet, exhilarating sense of freedom. The quiet hum of Alara's mansion, a sprawling estate nestled among ancient oaks and manicured gardens, usually a source of comfort, had long felt like an echo chamber for her unfulfilled desires. Every grand room, every silent corridor, seemed to amplify her loneliness, her longing for genuine connection. Her late husband, Edward, a brilliant but intensely private tech visionary, had left her a fortune so vast it bordered on the unimaginable. Billions, meticulously managed by a team of discreet financial advisors and prudently invested in diverse portfolios, ensured that Alara would never want for anything material. Yet, money, as she had learned through decades of bitter experience, could not buy the one thing she truly craved, a loving, reciprocal family, a bond of genuine affection that transcended mere financial exchange. From the moment Orion, her only son, had announced his engagement to Kaelin, a woman whose beauty was only matched by her ambition, Alara had opened her heart and her coffers without reservation. Orion had always been a dreamer, easily swayed by the latest get-rich-quick schemes, perpetually on the cusp of a breakthrough that never quite materialized. He was charming, handsome, and utterly devoid of financial acumen, a perpetual child in a man's body. Kaelin, on the other hand, was ambitious, driven by a relentless pursuit of status and appearance. She saw Alara's wealth not as a benevolent gift, but as a bottomless well from which she was entitled to draw, a resource to be exploited for her own social advancement. Alara, blinded by her love for Orion and her desperate desire for Kaelin's acceptance, had, for far too long, allowed herself to be just that. Alara's generosity had started subtly, with a lavish wedding gift of a honeymoon to the Amalfi Coast, a trip Kaylin had declared absolutely essential for their social standing. Then came the down payment on their first modest home, a quaint suburban dwelling that Alara made simply because she wanted them to have a solid start, a nest from which to build their lives. But as Orion's entrepreneurial ventures consistently floundered, each one a spectacular failure disguised as an innovative idea, and Kaylin's taste for the finer things escalated, her demands growing bolder with each passing year, Alara found herself becoming the family's silent financial backbone, the invisible support system that kept their illusion of success afloat. Their first true financial crisis came when Orion's online pet-sitting startup, Positive Care, went belly up, leaving them deep in debt, with angry investors hounding them. Alara, heartbroken to see her son so stressed, so lost, quietly paid off all his business loans, a sum that would have crippled most families. "Just focus on your family, dear," she had told him, her hand gently stroking his hair, a gesture of comfort she now saw as enabling. "Your mother will handle this." Orion had hugged her, mumbled his thanks, and then, a week later, with breathtaking audacity, asked if she could fund Kaylin's dream of starting a high-end fashion boutique. Alara had agreed, hoping it would bring Kaylin joy and perhaps a sense of independence, a stable venture. The boutique, ironically named Haute Hopes, lasted 18 months before Kaylin declared it too much work, citing the demands of managing staff and inventory, and returned to her life of leisurely lunches and charity galas, leaving Alara to cover the remaining lease and liquidate the unsold inventory at a significant loss. Then came the Grandview estate itself. Orion and Kaylin had fallen in love with the sprawling mansion, its imposing facade and manicured grounds well beyond their means. Alara, desperate for her family to be happy, for them to have the life Kaylin so coveted, had not only provided the hefty down payment but had also taken on the entire mortgage herself, signing the papers with a hopeful sigh, ensuring they lived in the style Kaylin coveted. "It's an investment in your future, my dears," she had explained, though her true investment was in the hope of their affection, in the fragile dream of a closer family. She had even funded the extensive renovations Kaylin insisted upon, turning the already grand house into a palace of marble and crystal, each new addition a silent plea for their love. Kaylin's luxury car, a sleek, custom-ordered Bentley, its leather interior smelling of money and exclusivity, had been a Christmas gift from Alara 5 years prior. "Every woman of your standing deserves to drive in style, Kaylin," Alara had said, watching Kaylin's eyes light up with a genuine, if fleeting, appreciation. The annual maintenance, the exorbitant insurance premiums, even the occasional new tires, Alara covered it all. Orion, not to be outdone, received a new high-end SUV a year later, also courtesy of his mother, a silent testament to her bottomless well of generosity. The grandchildren, Leo and Sophia, were the brightest spots in Alara's otherwise solitary life. She adored them, their youthful energy a fleeting antidote to her loneliness. When Kaylin insisted on enrolling them in the most prestigious private schools, citing networking opportunities for their future, Alara readily agreed to pay the astronomical tuition fees. Not just tuition, but the school trips to Europe, the designer uniforms that cost more than some adults' wardrobes, the myriad extracurricular activities, everything was meticulously charged to Alara's accounts. She hoped these gestures, these financial sacrifices, would foster a bond, that her grandchildren would see her as a benevolent and loving presence, a cherished grandmother. Instead, they became accustomed to her financial support, viewing her as an endless source of funds rather than a grandmother. Calls were rare, visits even rarer, unless a new expense arose, a new demand for their grandmother's largesse. Vacations were another consistent drain on Alara's funds. Orion and Kaylin, along with the children, embarked on exotic trips annually, a month-long European tour, 2 weeks in the Caribbean, ski trips to Aspen, always first class, always at the most exclusive resorts. Alara always paid, often offering to join, only to be politely but firmly rebuffed. "Mother, you wouldn't enjoy the jet lag, it's a bit much for someone your age," Kaylin would say, her voice dripping with false concern, or "It's a family trip, dear, just us four, for some quality bonding." Alara would sigh, then transfer the funds, a familiar ache in her heart. Their disrespect grew bolder with each passing year, a gradual erosion of boundaries. Alara would occasionally try to offer advice, perhaps on financial prudence or career choices, her wisdom born of years of experience, only to be met with condescending smiles or outright dismissal. "Mother, you just don't understand modern business," Orion would say, waving a dismissive hand, as if swatting away a fly. Times have changed. Kaylin once openly mocked Alara's sensible, classic wardrobe, suggesting she needed a serious makeover if she ever wanted to fit in with their exclusive social circle, as if Alara's worth were measured by the labels on her clothes. A particularly painful memory, one that still pricked at her heart, was Leo's 18th birthday. Alara, believing it was a significant milestone, a threshold into adulthood, had arranged a quiet dinner at his favorite Italian restaurant, just the three of them, a rare, intimate gathering. She had also purchased a vintage watch, a family heirloom from Edward, to pass down to him, a tangible link to his heritage. When she arrived, dressed with careful optimism, she found only Orion and Kaylin, already seated, their attention on their phones. "Oh, Leo already made plans with his friends, Mother," Kaylin had said, eyes glued to her screen, barely looking up. "He's a busy boy. He said he'd call you later." He never did. The watch remained in its velvet box, a silent reproach, and Alara ate dinner alone, watching her son and daughter-in-law scroll through their phones, barely acknowledging her presence, their indifference a stark, painful truth. Another time, Kaylin had called, breathless, complaining about her personal assistant's inefficiency, the endless task of managing her overflowing social calendar. Alara, ever eager to help, ever seeking a way to be useful, offered to come over and assist Kaylin with her appointments. "Oh, Mother Alara, darling," Kaylin had chuckled, a brittle, dismissive sound. "With all due respect, your organizational style is a little old-fashioned. And besides, I have a very important lunch. Perhaps another time." Alara had hung up, her heart aching, a familiar knot of disappointment tightening in her chest. She was good enough to pay their bills, good enough to fund their lavish lifestyle, but not good enough to spend time with, not good enough for her advice, not good enough for her presence. The cycle continued, an unspoken, insidious agreement where Alara provided everything, and in return, received crumbs of affection, mostly when a new bill needed settling, a new crisis averted. She knew, deep down, that she was being used. Her closest friends had hinted at it, their concerned glances speaking volumes. Her financial advisor had gently raised concerns about the sheer volume of her outgoing payments to her son's household, the alarming drain on her considerable assets. But Alara always rationalized it. They were family. They needed her. This was her way of staying connected, of ensuring her place, however peripheral, in their lives. The constant emotional deprivation, however, had slowly eroded her spirit, leaving her a shadow of the vibrant, hopeful woman she once was. Until that night, at the Grandview estate, when Kaylin's cold, public words had finally stripped away the last vestiges of her self-delusion. There was no connection. There was only a transaction. And Alara, for the first time in decades, decided to close the account. The morning after the party, Alara awoke to a silence that felt different. It wasn't the usual melancholic quiet of her empty mansion, the echo of her loneliness, but a silence pregnant with purpose, a quiet hum of burgeoning power. The sting of Kaylin's words had faded, replaced by a crystalline clarity, a sharp, undeniable understanding. The humiliation, raw and brutal as it had been the final, necessary catalyst. She had spent a lifetime trying to buy love, trying to earn a place in a family that had long ceased to value her beyond her monetary contributions. No more. The quiet resolve hardened within her, a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Alara rose, her movements deliberate, unhurried, each step a conscious choice toward liberation. She dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, a stark departure from her usual comfortable, yet somewhat unassuming attire. The fabric felt firm against her skin, a physical manifestation of her renewed resolve. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman whose eyes, though still lined with the history of her 78 years, now held a steely glint, a spark of defiance. This was not anger, not vengeance, but a quiet, profound act of self-preservation, a reclamation of her dignity. Her first call was to her personal banker, Mr. Harrison, a man who had managed her late husband's considerable assets for decades. His voice was always respectful, slightly deferential, accustomed to her quiet authority. "Mr. Harrison, good morning," Alara began, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil she had endured. "I need to make some immediate changes to my financial arrangements concerning my son, Orion Blackwood, and his wife, Kaylin Blackwood." Mr. Harrison, accustomed to Alara's consistent, long-standing financial support for her son's family, a veritable torrent of funds, paused, a subtle shift in his professional composure. "Certainly, Mrs. Blackwood. How can I assist?" "I require all standing orders, direct debits, and pre-authorized payments linked to their accounts, properties, vehicles, and any educational institutions for their children, to be immediately terminated," Alara stated, her voice devoid of emotion, each word a hammer blow of finality. "Effective today." A stunned silence hung on the line, Mr. Harrison momentarily speechless. "Mrs. Blackwood, are you referring to the mortgage payments on the Grandview estate? And the payments for Mrs. Kaylin Blackwood's Bentley, and Mr. Orion Blackwood's SUV? And the tuition for Leo and Sophia's private school?" His voice was incredulous, a tremor of disbelief. "All of them, Mr. Harrison. Every single payment. And any credit cards or supplementary accounts linked to my funds for their use. Cancel them all. Freeze them. Revoke any access they might have had. I want no further financial connection to them, whatsoever." Her tone allowed for no negotiation, no argument. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, regaining some composure. "Mrs. Blackwood, with all due respect, these are substantial amounts. The mortgage alone is due on the 1st of next month." "Are you absolutely certain?" The question was a formality, he could hear the unyielding resolve in her voice. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life, Mr. Harrison," Alara replied, her voice firm, resolute. "Consider it done. I also require a full audit of all payments made to or on behalf of Orion and Kaylin Blackwood over the past 25 years. I want a complete financial report delivered to my legal team within the week." Next, she called her longtime attorney, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, a formidable woman known for her sharp intellect, her unwavering loyalty, and her ruthless efficiency when necessary. "Eleanor, darling. I need your assistance with a rather delicate family matter." Alara explained the humiliation of the previous night, her voice calm as she recounted Kaylin's cutting words, and her decision to sever all financial ties, to dismantle the edifice of their dependence brick by painful brick. Eleanor listened patiently, her low hum of agreement occasionally punctuating Alara's narrative, a silent affirmation of her understanding. "Understood, Alara. This is a significant step, but entirely within your rights. What is your immediate priority?" "I want all legal agreements pertaining to the Grandview estate reviewed. I bought that house for them, Eleanor. The deed is in their name, but the payments were always mine. I want to understand my options regarding repossession or demanding a sale." "And the Bentley and the SUV?" "Both were gifts, but gifts given under the unspoken assumption of love and respect. I want to explore whether those gifts can be revoked, perhaps under the premise of conditional giving, or if I can demand their market value to be repaid." Alara's mind was sharp, focused. Eleanor paused, considering the legal complexities. "Repossession of a gifted property where you held the mortgage, even if paid by you, might be complex, but we can certainly pursue it. The mortgage default alone will be a powerful lever. As for the vehicles, it's a long shot, as gifts are generally irrevocable, but we can send a formal letter demanding repayment or return, citing their contractual obligations for upkeep, which they failed to meet." The immediate action, of course, is the cessation of all payments. The financial consequences for them will be swift and severe, a shock to their system. That is precisely the point, Eleanor, Alara said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips, a grim satisfaction. I want them to understand the true cost of their ingratitude. And I want to ensure my own financial security is uncompromised moving forward. No more loopholes. No more back doors. No more silent draining of my resources. The gears of Alara's financial empire began to turn, not to give, but to take back, to reclaim what had been so freely and ungratefully taken. The process felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The first ripple of panic for Orion and Kaylin came 2 days later. Kaylin was at her favorite high-end boutique, Lux Life, selecting a new designer handbag, a limited edition piece she had coveted for weeks, when her platinum credit card was declined. Not once, but twice, the sales assistant's polite smile faltering into a look of thinly veiled pity. Her face flushed with embarrassment, a deep, mortifying red, as the sales assistant politely explained the issue, suggesting she contact her bank. Kaylin, mortified and incandescent with rage, had to leave the store empty-handed, her carefully cultivated image momentarily shattered. It must be a temporary glitch with the bank, she fumed to Orion later, dismissively waving a hand. Mother always makes sure my cards are fine. She's probably just moved some funds around. The next morning, Orion received an automated email from the prestigious private school their children attended. It was a stern reminder that the tuition payment for the upcoming semester, due last week, had not been received, and a hefty late fee would be applied. Orion frowned, a flicker of concern crossing his usually placid face. That's odd, he mumbled, showing Kaylin his phone. Mother always handles the tuition. She must have forgotten. Forgotten? Kaylin scoffed, her voice sharp with disbelief. Alara never forgets a bill. She's obsessed with them. Call her. It's probably a mistake, a clerical error. Orion called his mother. The phone rang for a long time, the silence on the other end stretching, before going to voicemail, Alara's serene voice a cruel mockery. He tried again. And again. Each unanswered call fueled a growing sense of unease. Eventually, he left a message, a tone of mild irritation in his voice, attempting to mask his burgeoning anxiety. Mother, it's Orion. Just a quick call about the school tuition, it seems it hasn't gone through. And Kaylin's card was declined yesterday. Just a quick check-in. Call me back. The next day, a more urgent email arrived from the school, threatening immediate suspension of the children if payment wasn't received within 48 hours. Panic began to creep in, a cold, insidious dread. Kaylin's Bentley, which had always been impeccably maintained, suddenly had a warning light on its dashboard, a stark red symbol of impending doom. She took it to the dealership, only to be informed that the extensive service contract, previously paid by Alara, had been cancelled. The repair would cost several $1,000s, a sum they didn't have. Kaylin, stunned and furious, called Alara's number again, desperately. Still no answer. The following morning, the real shock wave hit. A formal letter from their mortgage lender arrived, starkly stating that their mortgage payment had not been received and they were officially in default. A notice of intent to foreclose was attached, along with a demand for the full outstanding amount within 30 days. Orion, reading the letter, felt his blood run cold, the words blurring before his eyes. Kaylin snatched it from him, her eyes wide with disbelief, her carefully constructed world teetering on the brink. This is impossible, she shrieked, her voice shrill with hysteria. Alara always pays the mortgage. She owns this house. What is going on? Orion tried Alara's number one last time, his hand trembling, his heart pounding in his chest. The phone rang, and this time, Alara answered. Her voice was calm, almost serene, a stark contrast to their escalating panic. Mother! What is happening? The mortgage, the school. Kaylin's car, everything is falling apart. Did you stop the payments? Orion's voice was a desperate blend of anger, fear, and utter confusion. Yes, Orion, Alara replied, her voice steady as a rock, unyielding. I did. Effective immediately. But, why? This is our home. The children's education. Are you ill? Are you losing your mind? Kaylin's voice shrieked from the background, laced with a venomous accusation. I am perfectly well, Orion. And my mind has never been clearer, Alara stated, her voice chillingly calm. I believe Kaylin explained it quite succinctly the other night. I wasn't invited. So, I decided to withdraw my invitation from your lives. Orion was speechless, the truth hitting him with brutal force. Kaylin snatched the phone, her face contorted with fury. You old witch. You can't do this. This is blackmail. We'll sue you. You are welcome to try, Kaylin, Alara said, her voice chillingly calm, a quiet amusement in her tone. My lawyers are expecting your call. And just so you are aware, my legal team is also reviewing the conditions under which the Bentley and Orion's SUV were gifted. You may find yourselves without transportation very soon. And I wish Leo and Sophia luck in finding a new school that can accommodate their needs on such short notice, a school with such high standards. Alara hung up, a profound sense of peace settling over her. Orion and Kaylin stared at the phone, then at each other, their faces pale with dawning horror. The carefully constructed facade of their opulent life was cracking, and the foundation, Alara's endless wealth, had just been ripped away. They had to confront her. Now. The air in Alara's elegant drawing room, usually filled with the gentle scent of fresh flowers and antique furniture, was now thick with tension, palpable enough to cut with a knife. Orion and Kaylin stood before Alara, their faces a mixture of fear, anger, and a desperate, clinging hope that this was all a terrible mistake, a temporary fit of pique. Kaylin, usually so poised and immaculately presented, looked disheveled, her expensive clothes rumpled from their frantic dash to Alara's mansion, her hair slightly askew. Orion, typically composed and unflappable, was sweating, his eyes darting around the familiar room as if seeing it for the first time, searching for an escape route. Mother! Orion began, his voice strained, a forced veneer of concern plastered over his raw panic. What is the meaning of this? You've cut off everything. Are you punishing us? Is this about the party? He tried to sound reasonable, conciliatory, but desperation seeped through. Alara, seated gracefully in her armchair, her posture regal and unyielding, merely looked at them, her gaze unwavering, her expression unreadable, a silent judge. She had anticipated this confrontation. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind for years, playing out countless scenarios, though she never truly believed it would come. Now, it was here, and she was ready, armed with the truth. Kaylin stepped forward, her voice rising in pitch, a hint of hysteria creeping in, a thin veil over her fury. Punishing us? This is economic terrorism. You're trying to destroy us. You can't just stop paying for the house, for the children's school, for my car. It's our life. Her hands gestured wildly, encompassing the grand life Alara had funded. Your life, Kaylin, Alara said, her voice soft, yet it carried an undeniable steel, each word a cold, hard fact. A life I paid for. A life I subsidized. For decades. Subsidized? Orion interjected, feigning outrage, attempting to deflect. Mother, you're wealthy. You have more money than you could ever spend. It's not a subsidy, it's family supporting family. His voice cracked with indignation. Is it, Orion? Alara's eyes narrowed slightly, a piercing gaze that stripped away his pretense. Tell me, when was the last time you truly supported me? When was the last time you asked if I needed anything, beyond a check? When did you last visit me without a financial request looming in the air, without some new venture needing a bailout? Orion flinched, unable to meet her gaze. Kaylin scoffed, her lips curled in disdain. Oh, please, Elara. Don't be so dramatic. We're busy. We have a life. You have your own life. Her dismissiveness was a familiar insult. My own life? Elara let out a low, mirthless chuckle, a sound devoid of humor, laced with a lifetime of disappointment. My own life consisted of waiting for your calls that rarely came, for your visits that were always brief and transactional, for a shred of genuine affection that never materialized. It consisted of opening my bank statements and seeing the endless stream of payments flowing to you, hoping that each transaction would buy me a moment of your time, a crumb of your love, a fleeting acknowledgement of my existence. That's unfair. Kaylin snapped, her face flushed. We love you. You're our mother, Orion's mother. Grandmother to Leo and Sophia. How can you be so cruel? Cruel? Elara's voice rose slightly, the pent-up frustration and pain of decades finally finding its voice, a quiet roar. Do you remember Leo's 18th birthday, Kaylin? I arranged a dinner, just for us, a special family occasion. I bought him a precious heirloom, a watch from his grandfather, a legacy. You told me he had other plans, that he was too busy. He never called. He never even knew about the watch, a piece of his heritage. Cruel, Kaylin, is treating a loving grandmother as a perpetual ATM, a resource to be tapped, only to be acknowledged when a bill is due, when a new luxury item is desired. She continued, each word a carefully aimed dart, striking home. Do you remember when I offered to help you with your boutique, Orion, after your pet-sitting venture failed spectacularly? I paid off all your debts, mind you. You promised me a proper partnership, then you just vanished when I asked about the books, about the progress. And Kaylin, when I offered to help you organize your life, your overflowing social calendar, you laughed and called me old-fashioned, suggesting my help was beneath you. Was that not cruel? Orion shifted uncomfortably, his eyes downcast. Kaylin's face was a mask of furious indignation, her carefully composed facade cracking under the weight of Elara's words. This is ridiculous. We're talking about a party. You showed up uninvited, she shrieked, desperate to revert to the immediate slight. I showed up uninvited, Elara repeated slowly, her voice taking on a chillingly calm quality once more, a quiet, deadly precision. To my only son's 25th wedding anniversary. An event where every acquaintance, every distant relative, every social climber was present, welcomed with open arms. But not me. Your own mother. And when I arrived, Kaylin, you looked me in the eye, and you said, you weren't invited to this party. Do you know what that felt like, Kaylin? To be dismissed, publicly humiliated, by the very people I have supported, cherished, and bled for over 2 decades? To be cast aside like an inconvenient embarrassment? Kaylin looked away, a flicker of something, perhaps shame, perhaps just annoyance that her carefully constructed world was being exposed, crossing her face. I have paid for your mansion, Kaylin. Every single mortgage payment since the day you moved in, pouring my fortune into its upkeep. I bought your Bentley, and Orion's SUV, and paid for their exorbitant upkeep, their insurance. I paid for Leo and Sophia's elite education, their international trips, their designer clothes. I funded every single one of Orion's failed ventures, each one a money pit. I paid for your extravagant vacations, your lavish parties, your relentless social climbing. I gave you everything. Elara's voice was now a low, powerful rumble, vibrating with the weight of decades of suppressed emotion, and you gave me nothing but disdain, ingratitude, and a cold, empty silence, punctuated only by requests for more money, for more things, for more of my resources. Orion, seeing his mother's unshakable resolve, her unwavering strength, tried a different tactic, a desperate, theatrical plea. He got down on his knees, tears welling in his eyes, a performance honed by years of manipulation. Mother, please. You're our only family. We made a mistake. We were thoughtless, we were distracted. But we love you. Please, don't do this. We'll lose everything. The house, the cars, the children's future. You can't let that happen. Kaylin, seeing his performance, quickly joined him, dropping to her knees, though her tears seemed less genuine, more forced, an act. Yes, Elara. We'll change. We'll visit you every day. We'll have family dinners. We'll appreciate you. We'll be better. Just turn the money back on. Her voice was a desperate whine. Elara looked at them, kneeling before her, their pleas echoing the desperate pleas of every manipulative individual throughout history, a pathetic, transparent display. The sight was pathetic, almost comical in its blatant artifice. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a quiet, serene liberation. This wasn't about money, not anymore. It was about self-respect. Orion, Elara said, her voice firm, resolute, get up. Both of you. This performance is beneath you. And it is certainly beneath me. They hesitated, then slowly rose, their faces a mixture of confusion, humiliation, and renewed panic, their desperate act having failed. My decision is final, Elara continued, her voice unwavering, a testament to her newfound strength. I have instructed my bank and my legal team to cease all payments immediately and permanently. Your mortgage is your responsibility now. Your children's tuition is your responsibility. Your cars are your responsibility. You are 52 and 50 years old. It is long past time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet, to take responsibility for your own lives. Orion's face crumpled, the full weight of her words finally hitting him. Kaylin let out a frustrated cry, a guttural sound of defeat. You heartless old woman. We'll be ruined. You'll see your grandchildren living in poverty. You'll regret this. Her threats were empty, powerless. Elara merely smiled, a genuine, serene smile that reached her eyes, a reflection of her inner peace. I assure you, Kaylin, the only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. I bought your comfort, your status, your children's education. What I could never buy, it seems, was your love or your respect. And now, I refuse to pay for their absence any longer. She rose from her chair, her posture straight and regal, a woman reborn. This conversation is over. I believe my staff will show you out. Orion and Kaylin stood frozen, staring at the formidable woman who had once been their malleable benefactor, their endless source of wealth. The air shifted. The power dynamic, which had been theirs for decades, had irrevocably changed. Elara, the silent, enabling matriarch, had finally reclaimed her throne, asserted her dignity, and found her freedom. Orion and Kaylin stumbled out of Elara's mansion, the grand doors closing behind them with a resounding thud that echoed the finality of their visit, a definitive end to their privileged existence. The late afternoon sun seemed to mock their despair, casting long, distorted shadows that mirrored the crumbling of their world. They drove home in stunned silence, the air in Kaylin's Bentley thick with unexpressed fury and dawning terror, each mile bringing them closer to a stark new reality. The reality of Elara's decision began to hit them with the force of a tidal wave almost immediately upon their return to the Grandview estate. Within hours, the phone calls started, a relentless barrage of financial doom. The mortgage lender, stern and unyielding, reiterated their default and the looming threat of foreclosure, the 30-day deadline a merciless countdown. The private school called, demanding immediate payment for Leo and Sophia's outstanding tuition and warning of their imminent expulsion, their children's elite education hanging by a thread. Kaylin's phone rang constantly with alerts from her credit card companies, notifying her of suspended accounts and outstanding balances, her platinum cards now worthless plastic. Orion's phone buzzed with similar notifications, his own financial house of cards collapsing. The Bentley, the gleaming symbol of Kaylin's status and social standing, was the first to fall. 2 days after their confrontation with Elara, a tow truck, grim and unannounced, arrived at the Grandview estate. A stern man with a clipboard informed Kaylin that the vehicle was being repossessed due to non-payment of the loan, which, as it turned out, Alara had been paying directly, a hidden cost they had never acknowledged. Kaylin shrieked, protested, and threatened legal action, but the Bentley was unceremoniously hooked up and driven away, leaving her stranded and humiliated in her own driveway, the last vestige of her perceived importance gone. Orion's SUV, another of Alara's gifts, followed suit a week later, leaving them without private transportation. The children, Leo and Sophia, were pulled from their prestigious private school. The immediate shock and shame of being suddenly unable to attend school with their elite friends hit them hard, a brutal awakening to their parents' precarious financial situation. Kaylin, scrambling and desperate, enrolled them in a local public school, a move she considered a monumental step down in their social standing, a public declaration of their fall from grace. The children, accustomed to privilege and luxury, complained bitterly about their new environment, the lack of amenities, the sheer ordinariness of it all, but they had no choice. The Grandview estate, once their fortress of luxury and a monument to Kaylin's ambition, began to feel like a ticking time bomb. The 30-day notice for foreclosure loomed, casting a long shadow over their days. Orion, who had always relied on his mother's funds to float his nebulous business ventures, his brilliant ideas never quite materializing, found himself completely without income, without a safety net. His entrepreneurial spirit suddenly seemed useless without a vast inheritance to back it up. He frantically called every contact he knew, attempting to secure quick loans or partnerships, but his reputation as a financial black hole, a charismatic but incompetent dreamer, preceded him. No one was willing to gamble on Orion Blackwood without Alara's money. Kaylin's social life, once the very core of her existence, a carefully curated performance, began to unravel with startling speed. Without the Bentley, without the ability to host lavish parties, without the endless flow of designer wardrobe Alara had funded, Kaylin found herself increasingly excluded from her exclusive circle. Lunches became less frequent, invitations ceased. The whispers started, whispers about their sudden financial troubles, about the mysterious disappearance of the Bentley, about the children attending public school. Kaylin, who lived and breathed for appearances, for the approval of her peers, found her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, exposing the hollow core beneath. They tried contacting Alara again, of course. Repeated calls, desperate voicemails filled with pleas and veiled threats, even a terse, pleading email from Orion, outlining their impending ruin. All were met with silence. Alara had changed her phone number, disconnecting herself completely. Her staff had been meticulously instructed to politely inform anyone inquiring about Orion and Kaylin that Mrs. Blackwood was unavailable, that her schedule was now her own. Meanwhile, Alara, having firmly shut the door on her past, began to open new ones, new avenues of self-discovery and genuine happiness. The very afternoon Orion and Kaylin left, their pathetic pleas echoing in the silent drawing room, Alara made a call she hadn't made in years, a call to a forgotten part of herself. "Patricia? It's Alara." "Yes, Alara Blackwood." "I know, it's been ages. I was wondering, would you care for a game of bridge sometime next week? And perhaps that trip to the Italian lakes we always talked about, the one we promised ourselves years ago? I'm thinking of finally doing it, truly experiencing it." Patricia, an old friend from Alara's younger days, a woman who had quietly watched Alara's slow self-sacrifice with concern, was overjoyed. They had drifted apart as Alara became consumed by her son's family, her life narrowing to their demands. The bridge game was a delight, filled with laughter and genuine camaraderie, a true connection Alara hadn't felt in years. A week later, Alara booked her trip to the Italian lakes, not with the intention of being a chaperone for her son's family, a silent observer of their pleasure, but to truly experience it for herself, to paint the breathtaking landscapes she had always admired in photographs, to breathe in the beauty unburdened. She enrolled in a local art class, something she had always wanted to do but never had the time or the emotional space for. She joined a book club, attended symphony concerts, and even started volunteering at a local animal shelter, her quiet compassion finding a new outlet. Each new activity, each genuine smile from a new acquaintance, each unburdened laugh, was a small victory, a brick laid in the foundation of her new life. The mansion, once an echo chamber of loneliness, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where she could finally be herself, where her interests and desires were paramount. She had spent so long trying to fill the void within her with her son's love, only to find it overflowing when she finally invested in herself, in her own well-being and happiness. Months later, the crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, and Alara's life bloomed anew, vibrant and full of unexpected joys. She sat on her sun-drenched patio, a canvas propped on an easel before her, her brushes dancing across the surface, capturing the golden hues of the garden, a reflection of the vibrant life within her. Her days were now filled with purpose and passion, not the hollow anxiety of awaiting calls or the quiet despair of unacknowledged sacrifices. Alara had sold the Grandview estate for a substantial sum. Orion and Kaylin, unable to make the mortgage payments, had lost the house to foreclosure, a bitter end to their lavish dream. The proceeds from the sale, after the bank took its share, were a pittance compared to what Alara had put into it over the years, but it was enough for them to secure a much smaller, far less opulent home in a modest suburb, a stark reminder of their changed circumstances. Orion had finally been forced to take a real job, as Kaylin derisively called it, a middle management position that barely covered their new, reduced expenses, a far cry from his grand ventures. Kaylin, stripped of her social standing and her means, struggled immensely. The designer clothes lay unworn in her closet, the charity galas now seemed like a distant, unattainable dream, a world she could no longer inhabit. She tried to restart her fashion boutique, but without Alara's endless funding, it quickly withered, unable to sustain itself. The grandchildren, Leo and Sophia, had adapted, albeit slowly, to their new reality. Public school had been a rude awakening, a harsh lesson in humility, but it had also, perhaps, grounded them, forcing them to confront a world beyond their privileged bubble. They visited Alara more often now, not with requests for money, but simply to talk, to share stories, to seek genuine connection. Alara suspected it was partly because their parents were too busy trying to keep their heads above water to pay them much attention, but she cherished these nascent, genuine connections, these unburdened conversations. She taught Leo to play chess, a game Edward had loved, a way to connect with his grandfather's memory, and helped Sophia with her art projects, something Kaylin had always dismissed as frivolous. The children, for the first time, were seeing their grandmother as a person, not a purse, a source of wisdom and affection, not just funds. Alara had discovered a profound truth in the months that followed her decision. Her wealth, once a tool for appeasement, a burden of obligation, had become a catalyst for liberation. She now spent her money on experiences that enriched her soul, art classes that rekindled a childhood passion, charitable donations to causes she truly believed in, travel that broadened her horizons, and most importantly, on cultivating genuine friendships, nurturing reciprocal relationships. She hosted bridge games, lively book club discussions, and intimate dinner parties in her beautiful home, filled with laughter and genuine warmth, a far cry from the hollow echoes of the past. She was no longer the quiet, enabling matriarch, but a woman fully alive, radiating a quiet strength and deep contentment, her spirit finally free. Orion and Kaylin, stripped of their safety net, their illusions shattered, were forced to confront the consequences of their choices. Their manipulative pleas had yielded nothing, their threats had been empty. They were learning, the hard way, that true security came not from inherited wealth, but from self-reliance and genuine effort. They were learning, too, that some relationships, once poisoned by entitlement and disrespect, could not be salvaged, no matter how much money was thrown at them. Alara, however, had learned the most profound lesson of all, that love and respect could never be bought. They had to be earned, reciprocated, and freely given. And that the most important act of loyalty and generosity was, ultimately, the one she extended to herself. She had found her freedom, not in cutting ties, but in severing the illusion that had bound her for so long. And in doing so, she had finally found true peace, a happiness that no amount of money, given or withheld, could ever truly define. And that, dear viewers, is a story of justice served, of a formidable woman reclaiming her power, and a harsh lesson learned about the true cost of ingratitude. Alara's journey reminds us that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and for others, is to set clear boundaries and demand the respect you deserve. If you enjoyed this powerful tale of transformation and justice, you'll find many more stories like it right here on our channel. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another captivating story. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a similar situation of ingratitude from someone you've helped? Or perhaps, have you had to make a difficult decision to prioritize your own well-being over someone else's expectations? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We love reading your stories.